Hello everyone, greetings from PayTabs technical support team. In this series, you will learn how to integrate with PayTabs through our PT2 API endpoints. And we will walk you through the fourth integration type, which is the own form. For the purpose of this series, we have created a very simple Laravel project to walk you through the integration process. But feel free to follow the steps in this series with your own project, whatever the programming language or the frameworks used to integrate with PayTabs. So, let's get started. In this video, we are going to learn more about one of our follow-up transaction, which is the query transaction. So, let's get started. The first thing you should know is that you can find the full documentation for this part inside PayTabs support portal under the article called the Own Form APIs Integration Manual. Now, if we navigate to the integration manual step 7 manage transaction, we will see that this step is dedicated to manage your already existed transaction. So whenever you have initiated a transaction and you want to do a follow-up in this transaction, like refund it, if it's an authorized transaction you want to capture it or void, and maybe if you want to just get all these transaction details, you want to query the transaction details, and this is what we are going to learn about in this solution article. The query transaction API is an API created for you to query all the transaction details using only the transaction reference or the cart ID of this transaction. So simply what you are going to do is you are going to send a request to PayTabs. This request will contain only the profile ID and the transaction reference, or your profile ID and the cart ID, and in return you will receive all this transaction details inside the response. So in order to test this out, we have created a very simple view for you that only takes the transaction reference and retrieve the transaction details for you. In order to do that, we are going to initiate a new payment. Over here, I'm going to initiate a payment. I'm going to use one of my test cards over here. Let's go out. And once I check out, okay, I have my payment details. Oh, it seems I have an error. It's declined. Let's see the reason for declined. Okay, yes, I have used an invalid expiry days. As you can see, my card, I have validated a wrong year over here, so I'm going to pass a year that upcoming, not a past year, and I'm going to click on checkout. Once I passed, now I have a successful transaction, and you can see inside my callback over here I have received a response, but for some reason, let's say that I have missed this response, I did not get this response, I want to get the details, all the details mentioned here. So what you can do, if you have the transaction reference, you can take this transaction reference and just send it in a request over here. Now inside our code, you can see that we have created a very simple query below. It takes the profile ID from our environment file, and it only takes the transaction reference from your front end that we just created over here. Now I'm going to just reload, pass the query, and as you can see here, I have received all of the transaction details. I have the customer details, I have the shipping details, I have the payment results. So as you can see here, this is an authorized transaction. Now, actually, as we have an already declined transaction or an error transaction, this one, we can also get it. So let's copy this one that did not go through, and let's try to query its details like that. And now inside the payment result, I will see why it has decline or why it's an error. So I can see here the response message, which is the invalid card expiry date. Now the other way of using that is using, if you don't have the transaction reference, is to use the cart ID. So now I'm going to change that with the cart ID this time, and I'm going to get back over here, and this time I'm going to take the cart ID, which is this one, and of course I can take it from here. I'm going to pass it to my transaction over here like that, and as you can see, I have received an array. Now, why I have received an array of transaction reference or transaction response? Because the cart ID is not unique. So let's say you have initiated two transactions with the same cart ID, you will receive these two transactions over here. Actually, let's test it out. I'm going to get back over here, and I'm going to my own form payload, and instead of passing my card ID and random string like that one, I'm going to pass the old card ID. Okay, I'm going to save it out. Let's get back to initiating a new payment like this one. I'm going to take this time, I'm going to take my test card from here, use it down here like that. Okay, use a correct year, press on checkout. As you can see, it's a successful transaction. I have the same cart ID. Now, once I take this cart ID and pass it to my UI, that one we created, this one, as you can see, now I have the response for the two transaction of this cart ID. Now, this is the difference between using the cart ID in the query API and using the transaction reference in the query API. The transaction reference will get you the response for details for this transaction, but the cart ID will get you the response for any cart ID or any transaction that contain this cart ID. Now that we have learned how we can use the query API, we can move to the next video.